My name is Allie Pease, and for part of my research assignment, I examined the work La Japonaise, Lady Beside the Water, by my favorite artist of all time, Henri Matisse. And this is my rendering of that painting, which is available to go and see at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Before I go into talking about the painting itself, I just want to give you some information, background information on Henri Matisse, because I think that it is important to understand where he came from as an artist in order to fully understand his work. Um, Henri Matisse was born in December of 1869 in France. He grew up in the Bourgogne region of city of France, which was known for its luxurious fabrics and textiles. Matisse's father and grandfather were both weavers, so even as a young child, Matisse had this appreciation for textiles, patterns, and design. And as a poor young art student in France in the late 1800s, Matisse used what money he had to buy and collect little scraps of cloth from Parisian junk stalls and just textiles and weavers all around the Paris area. Matisse, as a young artist, started painting traditional Flemish style works, but it was in 1905 when him and his and Doren traveled to the French Riviera, which borders the Mediterranean, was when Matisse fell in love with the bright colors, the everything and just about the Mediterranean and all the colors that he saw down there, and he abandoned his traditional style of Flemish works, which were oil-based, kind of dark, mundane subjects, and moved into painting with expression and color. This movement started in 1905 and short-lived only until 1907 would be known as Fauvism. Fauvism in French means the wild beasts because a lot of critics were not happy about this style of painting, meaning the untraditional use of color, the brightness of it, and so they gave them that nickname along with Matisse and the other group of French artists which followed him in this movement. Even in the Japonaise, the geisha woman wears a kimono that is more detailed than the entire painting, which even though this is a Fauves painting, you can still see the influence. My picture doesn't give it much justice, but the kimono itself is very detailed, and this can be linked back to Matisse's appreciation of textile and textile design. Therefore, he wanted to make the geisha woman's kimono as elaborate and the most important aspect of the painting. Matisse would go on to create other famous works such as La Poisson Rouge, the goldfish, and the Red Studio, all of which his paintings had some sort of textile influence in it, whether it was using Persian rugs as a backdrop, using some sort of silk gauze as like a woman's cover when he's painting like a nude or something like that. He always had to incorporate some use of textile or cloth or fabric into his paintings. In 1940s, Matisse was diagnosed with cancer and underwent a surgery that left him bed and wheelchair-ridden and unable to get up and physically paint on a canvas anymore. But even though he couldn't paint anymore, that didn't stop him from creating art. From his diagnosis up until his death at age 84, mind you, in 1954, he created the paper cutouts, which would later go on to be made into his book called Jazz. The paper cutouts were a series of paper cutouts with scissors where he used his textile knowledge and pattern knowledge to create these beautiful, ornate, still influenced heavily on the brightness and boldness of color, and made these beautiful textile designs out of paper cutouts. And he was highly influenced, you can tell in some of his paper cutouts, by the kuba cloths of the Congo in Africa. They were highly patterned, and even though they weren't very bright, they just had all these intricate patterns which Matisse fell in love with and referred to them as his African velvets. And a series of paper cutouts that he did is actually called Les Velours, which means the velvets, in homage to the kuba cloths. Matisse, even by his death, had acquired what he called a textile library. Even for a man growing up or living in the the early, pardon me, 19th century, oh gosh, no, the early 20th century, he was very well traveled and global. He had been to Algeria, Morocco, Tahiti, Russia, several occasions, because one of the people who bought his paintings the most lived over in Russia, Germany, and even to the United States. He just wanted to gain as much worldly knowledge about art and what other cultures thought of art, what other areas thought of art as possible. And every time he went on an excursion, for example, one time he was down in Tahiti, and he was always wearing like little helmet hats, but his tour guide had these hats that were made out of straw, and being a descendant of weavers, he fell in love with the textile usage of the straw hat and brought that back, and ditched his helmet style hat and wore the Tahitian straw hats instead up until his death, which I thought was kind of interesting. And Matisse also, like, a lot of people don't realize about how influential the textiles were on his art. I actually didn't realize it either until I did a very, very extensive 12-page research paper on Matisse's textile collection, and learned that he just didn't use the textiles in his works, he collected them as well. And as I stated earlier, he began to collecting textiles in the early 20th century when he was just a very poor art student, and it was his way of getting inspiration, and it was just born innately in him, and because of his upbringing and where he lived and everything, and that he knew that textiles would always be a very important part of his art. And also with the paper cutouts, it was very important for him to be skilled with using scissors, and because he had done some costume design and sewing back in the early 20th century, he was very accustomed to using scissors, and it came just as naturally as using scissors as it did for using a paintbrush for him. So he used the scissors really well and was able to create these very intricate designs that people that probably didn't have any weaving history or technique wouldn't have been able to create. I recommend for anyone more interested in reading about Henri Matisse to look at the book Matisse and His Textiles, which is where I got a lot of my information about his textiles, along with a lot of others, but this was the one that book I really found interesting. And if you go to the MoMA, go check out La Japonaise, Woman Beside the Water, along with Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth, and Number One by Jackson Pollock, which is a huge wall painting. I like all those artists because they're all different from each other, but they all convey emotion into their paintings, and the emotional side of art, I believe, is what drives art and what makes it important and different from everything else, because it's just pure emotional. And so I hope you enjoyed my presentation on Henri Matisse, and go check out this painting because it's awesome, and so is Matisse. This is Allie Pease signing off. Goodbye.